Good afternoon, everybody. Today is March 8th, 2022. I hereby call the Subcommittee on Education and Instruction to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Representative Dixie. Here. Representative Griffey. Representative Harris. Here. Chairman Haston. Here. Representative Hicks. Here. Representative McKenzie. Here. Chairman Reagan. Here. Representative Warner. Here. Representative Weaver. Here. Chair Lady Moody. Here. Chairman Sapicki.
Here.
Chairman Sapicki, you have a quorum.
Are there any personal orders? Chairman Haston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Help me welcome one of my directors from Chester County, Director Troy Kilzer, is with us here today.
Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Chairman Sapicki. I have two people here I'd like for us to make welcome. One is I have one of my school board members that's in my district is Miss Emily Masters. Thank you for coming. And also we have in the audience, I have a teacher. Her name is Megan Baker, and she teaches at one of the schools here in Nashville. She's a 6th grade math teacher and the basketball coach, and the basketball team just won the city championship.
Oh, fantastic. Members, any other? All right, members, we're going through last calendar, and it's going to be, just bear with us today because we've got lots of amendments, lots of rolls, so we'll just work through it together. We'll take our time. We have an hour and a half. So first up is House Bill 2833, ask the roll to heal by the sponsor. First one, 2833, roll to the heel. Okay. Next up, House Bill 2429, ask the roll to the heel. Next up, House Bill 757 by Chairman White, rolled to the heel. Next up, number 4, House Bill 1850 by Representative Hurt, rolled to the heel. There is. Next up is House Bill 535 by Chairman Hawk. I don't see him. We're going to roll that to the heel. House Bill 1849 by Chairman Howell, off notice. Next up, House Bill 2106 by Representative Hakeem. You are recognized. Members, do I have a motion? Motion and a second. Do you have an amendment, Representative? Is it the drafting code 014877? Yes, sir. Does that make the bill, sir? Yes, sir. Members, I have a motion and a second for adoption. Motion is second. Let's add this to the bill. All those in favor of adding amendment 014877 to the bill say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Representative Hakeem, you are in the right position, sir. Present your bill.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After consultation and sharing of insight from members, yourself and members of the committee, what we've done is the amendment that we have is to move this back under the State Board of Education. Also, the starting date for this change would be school year 25-26, so there would be no immediate impact as far as fiscal note is concerned. And again, it deals with grades 5 through 8, appropriate text for that age group. Yes, sir.
Representative, this was the workaround we asked from last week.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
Thank you for doing that. Any questions? Ready to vote? Wonderful. All those in favor of sending House Bill 2106 to the full Education Committee, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. You're off to the full committee, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Members, next up, House Bill 2460 by Chairman Rudder is rolled to the heel. You don't want to run? Okay, members, next up is House Bill 2461 by Chairman Rudder. Chairman Rudder, you're recognized. Do we have a motion? Second. Motion and a second. I believe you have an untimely filed amendment on this. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
Is that drafting code 015001?
Yes, it is.
Members, this is an untimely filed amendment. I believe it does make the bill.
It does.
And this was a bill, this was a amendment that was worked out with the Department of Education?
That's correct.
Thank you. Members, I need a motion and a second to add this, or to consider this, I'm sorry. There's a motion and a second to consider. All those in favor of considering 015001, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay. Members, I need a motion and a second to add this to the bill. You have a motion and a second to add Amendment 015011 to the bill. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Okay. You are in a right position, Chairman Rudder. You have the mic. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As amended, a student or a parent can request additional time for their student to complete a TCAP test. The Department of Education will establish the required time limits for each TCAP test, along with the additional time that can be requested for that specific test. The additional time given to the student will be added at the end of the test, and this amendment also ensures that students with disabilities can still work with school districts to determine what type of accommodations will be made based on the student's needs.
Members, you heard an explanation of the bill and the amendment. Any questions? Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the sponsor. So this amendment took away the blanket 25 minutes, so it's going to be subject specific. Is that the case?
It's going to the test require different times. So if it was just 25 minutes, it could be longer than the test. So what they've done, the department will determine the appropriate additional time based on how much time the test actually takes.
Follow up.
Thank you. You know, and I definitely agree with the bill, but also would hope that the department in time starts to take some data on what they're seeing, you know, and that in terms of whether the timing is right. If at the last, you know, if you look at the last 10 answers and they're all C's, or you look at the last 10 answers and they don't really compare to the first, say, 30, the student may not have had enough time. So, you know, that it's a living, breathing kind of a bill in terms of trying to give the average student enough time to complete the examination so that we can get the most data on terms of how they're doing. So I'm glad that you made it floating, and I'm sure the state does things like that, but I just encourage them to continue to dig in to see what the appropriate amount of time for, again, the average student to complete this assessment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, ready to vote. All those in favor of sending House Bill 2461 to the Full Education Committee, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. You're off to the full committee, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Next up, House Bill 2818 by Representative Cooper. You are recognized. Do I have a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You have
and
a motion?
members.
Do I have a motion?
Afternoon.
And a second. Okay. You are recognized.
House Bill 2818 requires each local education agency to include a course of instruction for students in kindergarten through 12 with curricular design to educate students in conflict resolution that is grade, age, and age appropriate. And I have been working on this bill, and I've worked with, it says that this legislation is critical in order to address root causes, the root cause of the legacy of all of the trauma and violence that it produces. And we have been working also and interviewed teachers, school administrators, law enforcement professionals, and critical mental health and wellness providers. So their unified response is that we need to teach our students conflict resolution skills. And I was talking and discussing this because when I'm a retired teacher, and And even in growing up, we've always heard, we've always had some conflict somewhere in the home or school or community. But in the schools, primarily, what I did as a teacher, an elementary teacher, was to bring the children up and have them tell their stories on each side. And once they do that, then I would ask them questions and guide them into thinking first before they get angry and hit someone or so forth. We didn't have too many guns around at that time. And when they finish, I just tell them to hug and kiss. Now, the elementary children, you could do that then, but you can't do that now. So we just have to be vigilant and thinking ourselves to try to do what we can early on to teach these children how to resolve these problems without going home and bringing guns back and knives and whatever else that causes all the violence in our homes and our schools. So with that, Mr. Chair and members, I would stand for any questions that you may have.
Members, any questions? Chairman Haston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing this legislation. I appreciate your work on this. I think I would like to make a motion to perhaps take a first step of changing the requirement into an urging. If that would be the will of the committee, I would like to make that motion to make that, if that is a verbal amendment that we might be able to do today.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Yes, you okay with that? Okay, so what the motion would be is to delete the word shall and substituting is urged to. So we continue to move forward with this, but
yes,
if we don't make it a requirement, we still give the LEAs the flexibility to figure out how they're going to do this bill for you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. You have a motion on this to amend this, like we said. Is there any discussion? Upon seeing none, all those in favor of this verbal amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, the verbal amendment is on there. Any questions for the bill sponsor? Okay. Questions being called. All those in favor of sending House Bill 2818 to the full committee say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Representative Cooper, you're on to the full Education Committee.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes.
Chair and members.
Yes, ma'am. Next up, House Bill 2291 by Chairman Love. No, we'll wait.
All right, take your time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
Go ahead. We have a motion and a second. There's no amendment on this, so you are good to go.
House Bill 2291 follows in the same line of thinking of what President Cooper was talking about, teaching students about conflict resolution. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was famous for his nonviolent approach to resolving issues. Unfortunately, we have a situation now where many of our students are in the posture where they resolve many of their issues in a violent way. But more than that, when there's dissatisfaction with policy that is in place, we also need to educate our students about how to approach that in a non-violent fashion. And so this particular piece of legislation would require us to include in the MLK curriculum into our revision on the way, but in conversation with the chairman, I think there may be an appetite for an urging of this particular curriculum into our social studies revisions next year. So, Mr. Chairman, that is the summation of the legislation. I stand ready for questions.
Chairman's privilege, first of all. Members, if you look at these items that were brought up, 1 through 5, very things that we need to be making sure our children know about, that they can be able to discuss these and have good discussions on all of these things. Chairman, I do appreciate you bringing this bill. I believe we're probably going to urge this also, and then I think as a committee, when we get into these social studies standards, we need to make our voices known to the Social Studies Review Committee on standards, our intentions here, to make sure that we are as broad and diverse as we possibly can in teaching our children history. So with that being said, is there a motion to amend just to urge? Chairman Haston?
Make a motion to change requiring to urging.
Second, and let reflect that We shall delete the word shall and substitute, as we did before, is urged to. Members, that is the motion on this. Is there any objection to voting on this? All those in favor of this amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. You're in the proper position. Any questions for the bill sponsor? On seeing no questions, all those in favor of spending House Bill 2291 all into full education say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Mr. Chairman, you're on to full education, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
I believe you have the next one, too.
Yes, sir.
House Bill 2294 by Chairman Love. Do I have a motion? Motion is second. There is no amendment, correct?
Yes, sir. There's no
You're
amendment.
in the proper position, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members who had a chance to go out to Antioch High School when we toured there, you got a chance to see that the students out there were operating a credit union. And many of the students talked about the fact that when they were operating the credit union, it gave them a chance to really do a deep dive into financial literacy. It gave them a chance to talk about the importance of savings, the importance of credit, the importance of maintaining your bill payment in a timely fashion. Unfortunately, we have a situation where students in middle school aren't going through any financial literacy training at all. And this piece of legislation would require students in grades 6 through 8 to complete a financial literacy course that is age and grade appropriate. This, again, I think is a wonderful thing for our students to learn, because we do have situations where students are now being presented with opportunities early on in life to talk about financial literacy. We literally have a situation where the idea of paper money is no longer a thing of present conversation, but you're talking about things like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, but also when you talk about when students are getting ready to go to college or to go into career, are they able to balance the checkbook? Are they able to manage their finances? Are they going to be financially literate? And so I know we place a great deal of emphasis on literacy, but how much will we place on financial literacy? And so, Mr. Chairman, that's what this piece of legislation does. It proposes that we have this as a requirement, grades 6 through 8. That, Mr. Chairman, is my bill.
Sorry. Members, you've heard this on the bill. We did tour. She left. The teacher left. Or the schoolman left. We did tour that school together, and there was a lot of great things happening there in Metro Nashville, in that collegiate academy and other places. Probably going to another quick amendment on this thing. Just want to let you know. Do I have a motion on this bill to amend this? Go ahead, Chairman Haston.
Yes, thank you. I do make a motion to change require to urging again, and financial literacy is something that I would like for it to be really directed towards my 3 children. If we can't pass it any other time, just have my 3 kids be required to take it. I'll vote for that as well.
Yes,
but I'll make that motion.
Second. There's a motion and a second, and what the language shall read is on House Bill 2294. We shall delete the word shall in subsection A, and substituting once again is urged to. That's the only change in the bill. Everything else stays exactly the same. We have a motion and a second on that. Any discussion on the motion? Go ahead. Representative McKenzie.
Do you have your hand up?
Well, he has hand up too.
I beat you. I'm quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess my concern with all 3 of these is what are these 3 bills going to look like, 5 years down the line, or with that urging or our LEAs or the curriculum committees and the process are going to incorporate or ignore these. All 3 of these are extremely urgent and needed. This financial literacy piece is key as we educate the next generation, like you said, that won't have money in their wallet. It'll be on their phone. It'll be on their devices, maybe in a chip in their head. Who knows where it'll be? But it's a lot easier to spend money nowadays than it was. So I just think that all 3 of these, but this one in particular, we're going to have to get in front of this, and I'm just hoping that this urging will not be ignored, because it's a should, it's a if you have the time. That's the way I read those, and so that's my problem with that. This is important. All of these are important, so I just want to make sure that that, as you say, we can inform them and let them know. It sounds like that's going to be the flavor of this committee. But I'd ask, 5 years down the line, let's see how many systems, school systems, how many LEAs have incorporated this into their curriculum.
Let me help you out here, if you don't mind, Chairman Love. The intent here is that when we go to Social Studies Standards Review, we have these bills ready to go before the Standards Review Social Studies, and we can present these to them saying, we want you to insert these into the education of our children in the most appropriate way possible. So therefore, we have seamless transition. I, for one, will be happy to go with the representatives to the Social Studies Standards Review Committee and make sure the will of this committee is made known to them. I think everything that's been presented so far, and is important. And it's up to us as members of this committee to make sure that our voices are heard, who are the voices of the people of Tennessee. So didn't want to step on your toes there, Chairman.
No, I was going to say that I echo the sentiments of all the members. We don't yet know to what degree children will be able to provide leadership in the home financially if this course is passed, because you don't know how many situations there may be where a child has become one of the earners in the household and may be signing up for some plans to serve them later on in life, whether it's going to college again or working. So I think it's a wonderful situation. We'll look at urging and then follow back up with the state board about inserting in the right place, and then do a follow-up. The process of policy making is always first identifying the problem, then come up with possible solutions, getting legislation formed, then implementing it, and then the modification piece is always what comes maybe in the next General Assembly if we see it's not working. So I'm happy to be in a place where we've identified the problem, we're proposing a solution, and hopefully within the next year we will implement it. And then to Representative McKenzie's point, if it's not where we want it to be, we can modify it at some later date.
Members, we are still on the amendment. If there's no other questions, let's get the amendment on the bill. All those in favor of the verbal amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. You're in the proper position. Any closing statements?
No, sir.
Members, any questions for the sponsor? Questions being called. Chairman Moody.
Thank you. And one of the other things that I noticed when we went to Antioch, those students were definitely learning customer service and dressing properly, and all those things that our employers are just begging us to be sure we're not overlooking. So it was a good tour, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for adding that. Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for the sponsor? So on seeing none, all those in favor of sending House Bill 2294 to the Full Education Committee say aye. Aye. Mm-hmm. All those opposed say no. You're on to the full committee, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
Yes, sir. Next up is, there he is. Next up is House Bill 2000 by Representative Cochran. You are recognized. Motion and a second. Do we have an amendment, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do. 014937.
Untimely?
No, sir, that would be timely filed. I believe, unless y'all show something differently. Maybe. Yeah.
It is untimely, but we'll see. We'll try to get you in the correct position. Members, we have, I believe it's drafting code 014937. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
I need a motion to add this, or to consider this. Motion is second to consider this. Any discussion? Upon seeing none, all those in favor of discussing 014937 say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, we are in the proper position. I need a motion on this amendment, please, to add it to consider it. Second. We have a motion and a second to now take this amendment up. Any discussion on this amendment? Okay. Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just don't see it here, so could you describe the amendment for for us.
Let's do this, if it's okay. Representative Cochran, will you go and explain 014937? I assume it makes the bill.
It does, yes, sir.
So this will be like a presentation of the whole bill.
That would be fine.
Go right ahead, sir.
Yes, absolutely. And so this one, I'll give you a fair warning, gets into the weeds just a little bit, so I'll try to give you the high points, and then if we want to dig a little bit deeper, we can do that. Right now, if you have a teacher that teaches a single subject, let's say you're a 7th grade science teacher, in the year of a new standards adoption, when the state says we're going to have new science standards this year, and that same year, basically what they do is they redo the TCAP test for those standards. So that they redo the questions for the TCAP test that same year, which means that teacher cannot use her growth scores on TCAP because they're coming up with new cut scores. So those TCAP scores are of no use to that teacher. The way the current system is, that kind of forces her to use mostly the school's growth score when determining her overall level of effectiveness. Where that can be a problem is if you have a really good teacher who maybe is teaching at a struggling school. So you could be accidentally, I guess, harming a very good teacher's LOE score just by the fact that she may be teaching at a school that has a lower growth score because she has to take that school's growth score. She doesn't have one of her own to use. What this bill does is that it says in those years of a new standards adoption that it affects those teachers, they're able to rely a little bit more heavily on observation rather than the school's growth score. So again, long story short, trying not to punish a very good teacher for going to a school that might be struggling. We want to encourage that. And so this is kind of getting rid of an unintended perverse incentive there. So but again, we have the department here also if we have any really technical questions. But that's kind of the high points.
Members, you've heard an explanation of the bill, of the amendment, I'm sorry. If we're okay, let's get this amendment on the bill, then we can have a discussion. Without objection, all those in favor of adding amendment 014937 to the bill, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, you're in a proper position. Any questions for the bill sponsor? One question I have clarification-wise is we just passed House Bill 2116, which was on the House floor yesterday. There is no conflict with that bill.
No, sir. No conflict to my knowledge.
Thank you, Representative. Questions being called. Without objection, we're voting on House Bill 2000 to send to full education instruction. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. You're on the full committee, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and committee.
Okay. Next up is House Bill 2491 by Representative Clemens. Representative Clemens, you are recognized. Do I have a motion and a second?
Second.
You have a motion and a second, so you're in a proposition. I do not see there's an untimely filed amendment on this. Do you want to present your bill first, then we'll consider the untimely filed amendment?
I don't have an amendment on this piece of legislation.
Okay, Chairman Reagan has filed an untimely amendment on this.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
Chairman Reagan, is your drafting code 015228? You are correct, sir. Okay, members, I need a motion and a second to consider this, and then we'll get an explanation on the amendment. Motion and a second on the amendment. All those in favor of considering this amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Okay. If you want your no recorded, please see the clerk. Chairman Reagan, would you give us an explanation of this amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, we're doing the same thing with this amendment that we've done with the others. We're changing required to urge in subsection 1A. School is urged. And in subsection B2C, encouraged to use resources rather than required. And that's it. Otherwise, it stays the same.
Okay. Members, you've heard those two changes. Is there any discussion on the amendment to the amendment sponsor? Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's the same thing. I guess I would ask the sponsor of the bill for his thoughts and considerations on those shifts and changes.
Okay. Let me back up one second, then I'll come back. I promise I'll come back to you. We need to since we know what the amendment does, I need a motion and a second to accept the amendment and put it on the bill. Motion and second. Okay, any objection to putting this on the bill so we can go ahead? Chairman, Representative McKenzie, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, you know, not being a seasoned state lawmaker, I just find it necessary to have the sponsor be able to respond as to whether something can be put onto his or her bill. So I would hate for this to go on the bill, and now the conversation is had without, you know, the person that spent a lot of time on whatever bill that we're presenting before us. This is just in my mind, a question of process. I would at least like the sponsor to be able to say yay or nay whether they want this amendment filed by a different lawmaker to be put on his or her bill. So that's my unreadiness, is that it will be put on the bill before the sponsor can even speak to it.
Representative McKenzie, once the bill is motioned into the well, it is the possession of the committee. The committee decides what they want to do with the bill. If the bill sponsor does not like the amendment once it's put on the bill, he can withdraw the bill. That's normally the process. Hope that answered your question. Members, we need to add this amendment onto the bill. All those in favor of adding 015228 to the bill say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Amendment is on the bill. You're in the proper position. Representative Clemens, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly a first. Not getting to address the purpose of the bill before it was amended. The purpose of the bill was to require Holocaust education, age-appropriate and grade-appropriate instruction to public school students on the history of the Holocaust. Polling shows that anti-Semitism is on the rise. The eerie numbers about the amount of people who are coming out of school without understanding what the Holocaust was, or even its results and implications, and having a thoughtful discussion about what that means in society it is certainly concerning. My intent for this legislation was to require it. There is no, as it was previously drafted, and I suspect as amended, there was no fiscal notice, not significant on the bill, because there are resources available from the U.S. Holocaust Museum as well as the Tennessee Holocaust Commission that are readily available to not only provide materials and instruction to students in an age-appropriate and language-appropriate manner, but also videos that teachers can access online to learn how to discuss this, what language to use, how to talk about this with the age that they're teaching to make sure that it is age-appropriate. We also have Hadassah and the NCJW here in Tennessee that were willing to go and work with teachers and provide, resources and even funds. And grants are available even to the extent any cost would be incurred, even though there is no fiscal note on this. If a classroom decided they wanted to do a project or something of that sort, the U.S. History Holocaust Museum as well as the Tennessee Holocaust Commission have ample funds available and are ready to do this. And the intent was to require it. And I certainly, to the extent you want to urge it, that really kind of defeats the purpose of the legislation, because right now the option to teach the Holocaust exists. You can currently in the state of Tennessee, and if for those of you, I don't know any of you who ever take part in our Holocaust Remembrance Day on the House floor every year, it was online this year, but where we read the names and the stories of Holocaust survivors that reside among us in the state of Tennessee who are still alive, who witnessed this firsthand. And we read and share their stories. And I don't know if any of you ever participated in that, but that is something which is not only moving, but it is significant in the history of this world. And so when on that day, classrooms, and they honor teachers who do projects like the Paperclip Project in Tennessee and other things, and they honor those teachers who choose to teach this. So they can teach this now, and they can choose to pick up some of these lessons. The intent of this legislation was to require it. just last year or the year before, we passed a very similar bill requiring the teaching of 9/11. And we required that. And we used the word shall teach 9/11. And I think, this is something just as significant. And students should learn about this. And they should learn about it in an appropriate manner, with the appropriate training and in the appropriate way. And we cannot just simply urge them to do this significant chapter of international history. And so I would prefer not to just urge. I would require we shall. And so given that it defeats the intent of legislation, I would withdraw it.
Thank you.
It's embarrassing.
Next up is House Bill 2344 by Carringer. That is rolled to the heel. Next up is House Bill 1559 by Mitchell. This one requires a reconsider of our actions because we voted this down last year. I don't see Representative Mitchell. We'll roll this to the heel. Next up, 1564 by Mitchell, to the heel. Next up, 2400 by Mitchell, to the heel. Next up, 2399 by Mitchell, to the heel. Next up, House Bill 2312 by Griffey, to the heel. Next up is House Bill 2057 by Chairman Reagan. Chairman Reagan, you are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to roll this to the heel.
Without objection, to the heel. Looks like we'll be here next week. Okay. We're going to take a 2-minute recess.
Yeah.
Members, we are back in session now. Next up on the addendum is House Bill 1912 by Chairman Faison. Chairman Faison, you are recognized. Do I have a motion and a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. There is an untimely filed amendment on this.
Motion on to consider the untimely filed amendment.
Motion to consider amendment. All those in favor of considering amendment 014797 say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We are into consideration. Do you want to give us a brief explanation of what the amendment does before we move to adopt it?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. Very good to be with you today. The amendment does write the bill. It's an amendment that I've worked with the Department of Education on. And briefly, the amendment which writes the bill does two things. Where I live in East Tennessee, we have times where my two boys go to school way up in the mountains. And when it snows, that is the only school in my entire county that gets snow at times. When they have to call a snow day, the entire county is shut down, and not just my two sons' school. So what this bill would do, the first part of the bill, of the amendment, would allow them, if there is a snow day like that, that they could shut down a specific school and not the whole district. The second thing it does, it allows, and that's 2 days in the fall semester, 2 days in the spring semester. The second thing it would do, in my school, it's a rural community like some of y'all's. When it comes to staff, we are short-staffed often. When it comes to EOC testing, that's end-of-course testing, they have to focus a lot of their staff on the students that are being tested. This would allow for 2 days at the front or 2 days at the end at EOC testing for them to give virtual days, plus all the federal requirements for food and all that has to be a part of it. That's in the amendment. Allow them to be virtual that and just the students who are being tested. Now, why is that important for us is my testing coordinator tells me that it takes her around 7 days to do all the EOC testing because they're trying to jockey and have everything else going on with all the other students. She said, if y'all would give me a couple days, and a lot of education is not taking place during those EOC testing. She said, I could take it down and get it done in 2 days, possibly. So that's what this bill is doing, is just allowing the LEA, school superintendent, to have 2 days virtual at the beginning of the year, 2 days virtual at the end of the year to use either for extreme weather for one or something like that, or either for EOC testing. And that's basically the whole bill.
Okay. Members, you've heard an explanation of the amendment. We have to adopt the amendment before we can discuss it. So I need a motion. Motion and a second on amendment to adopt. All those in favor of adopting amendment 014797 say aye. Opposed, no. We've adopted the amendment. Let's put it on the bill real quick because it does make the bill. Is that right, correct, Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Motion and a second to, motion and a second. We did? Yeah. Then never mind. We've already done that. Questions? Representative McKenzie, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the sponsor, I definitely know your neck of the woods and probably know the school area that you're talking about. I agree with that aspect of it. But in terms of the testing, I guess I'm that to me would be some type of, security kind of concerns. I just don't know how we can maintain the security of the testing, the validity of the testing, if it's done remotely without a proctor or anyone in and around that person. So that's the part that concerns me. I definitely understand the inclement weather, but to allow remote testing at that age, what K through 12, I think is a bit of a stretch, I guess I say. That piece concerns me, and how would you propose the system, the LEA and the state board verify that no malfeasance is done in the conducting of that test?
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Chairman Sapicki. So maybe I misspoke. This only allows for the students who are not being tested to have a virtual day. The students who are going through EOC testing would have to be on campus at the time. This has nothing to do with allowing anybody to go anywhere during testing, except for the students who are not being tested those days.
Representative, did you want to respond, Representative McKenzie? I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Yeah, I guess I agree with you that I must be confused on this one. So could you restate what you were saying about the 2 days of testing, if you don't mind?
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Chairman Sapicki. What this bill would do is, for my testing coordinator, for any student that's involved with EOC testing, so that's going to be 8th grade and up, it would allow my testing coordinator to let other students who are not being tested that day to have a remote day. The students who are being tested, they can do that. One of the reasons for this, Representative McKenzie, is rural communities such as mine struggle with staffing. And so it takes so much proctoring, so much preparation to present with all the federal guidelines, with all the state guidelines, to actually do an EOC testing. They have to use all of their resources to focus on the kids who are being tested through that time. My testing coordinator has come to me and said, if y'all would just give me some time to be able to remote with these children who are not being tested, focus our attention of all our staff with them we can get EOC done and get the students back in and instruction happening. In addition, I think you'd be pleased to know if you look at the second page of the amendment down to I-7, we also had to follow with all the federal guidelines, and if there's the meal proportions, if there are children who they're expected to be able to have meals, that still has to be covered, and they would still be able to come and be able to get meals at the school.
Any other questions for the bill? Chairman Dixie, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was, and I may be confused, but I think I remember this, that when we passed the law, when we came in for the special session and things of that nature, did we not allow for 5 days for virtual, up to, I don't know if it was 5 or 10 days before any penalty would be assessed for virtual classrooms?
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Chairman Subcommittee. Representative Dixie, from what I understand, with the current law, a LEA is allowed to request a waiver from the commissioner to be able to do a virtual day. I've also been instructed that that's not happened very often, and this really isn't just for that. This is specifically geared for inclement weather or EOC testing, and that's why we listed. We took any other reasons wouldn't be a part of this bill. Only for those 2 reasons would the LEA be able to do this, and this would make it to where they wouldn't have to go and get permission from the Department of Education. They would just already have it built in that they can do this.
And I think that I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think that goes along with the point is that we put so many constraints on our LEAs that we've hamstrung an LEA because of something that we want to do statewide, that we've seen through this pandemic that virtual classrooms help in some situations. But we, as the General Assembly, we've put such a tight rope and a tight stranglehold on our LEAs that sometimes they don't have the leeway. So, I mean, I support your bill, but I just feel like that, we created a problem, now we're coming back trying to solve the issue of it. So I think that hopefully we could, when we present bills, that we can look farther down the line and see what the true impact will be. But sometimes we don't know the intent of a bill when we do it. But I just want to make it out. But I think that sometimes we actually create problems and then we have to come back and try to solve them. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Chairman Subcommittee. And Representative, I would echo what you're saying, that this gives some authority back to the LEA. This gives them some latitude and to your school superintendent. So this is a good start in the right direction. I asked, just for I asked the original bill, asked for 5 days. The administration had difficulty with that. They were comfortable with 2 days. So for me, if we're going to allow our LEA to have discretion on these 2 days, I'm hoping that's what we can give them.
Question has been called on House Bill 1912. Without objection, all those in favor of sending House Bill 1912 on to full education, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Mr. Chairman, you're on to full education. We'll see you next week. Members, without objection, Representative Griffey did make it back for his bill. We have time. Without objection, I'm going to pull House Bill 2312 off of the heel. Representative Griffey, you are recognized. We have a motion and a second. Motion and a second. I believe we have an untimely filed amendment. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that was from the Department of Ed. I have 015123 that makes it agreeable with them.
I need a motion to consider. Motion to consider. Is there a second? Second. Okay. All those in favor of considering this amendment say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Okay. We have the amendment. You would give us. Does this make the bill?
It does. It's my understanding it does.
At the motion on the amendment to add it to the bill. Is there a second? Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor of adding amendment 015123 to the bill say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. You're in the proper position, Representative Griffey. Go ahead and present your bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This bill is intended to address an issue I ran into. I was at one of the meetings that Commissioner Swin had with a number of our locals in trying to get information and input on the BEP reformulation thing. And an issue came up with testing of our 3rd grade and 8th grade students and the difficulties in their scoring. And one of the local superintendents said the difficulty is not with our students being able to read, it's part of the tests are difficult and they're not really measuring effectively what we need to. So I tried to obtain a copy of the test or old test questions or whatever, and I had to almost walk through coals of fire to get them. So what this bill simply does is give legislators the ability to obtain the test questions while still maintaining security of the test so they don't get out to parents or someone else that might manipulate the test. And so that's pretty much what the bill does. And the department head may be here to comment. I don't know if or not, but it's my understanding they're supportive of the bill now as amended.
I'm assuming the Department of Education in the back is sitting here. This amendment came from the department to be a thumbs up on this one. Thank you very much. Well, hold on. Representative Harris, do you have a question?
Thank you, Chairman. So this amendment, so this is saying that we would have access to the test at the time that they're in the middle of taking the test, or we will have access to this this example of the test after the test is done for security reasons.
Representative Griffey?
Well, the bill actually says that the department State Board of Education shall promulgate rules to protect the integrity and confidentiality of materials that are disclosed pursuant to this section. So, and those must be promulgated in accordance with the Uniform Administrative Procedures Act. So I think it would depend on what the rules are, but the design is to protect the integrity of the test and test questions when they come out and what sequence and at what whether there's testing going on or not. I think that's going to be addressed in the rules.
Thank you.
Okay. With no more questions for the bill sponsor, let's, all those in favor of sending House Bill 2312 on to the Full Education Committee, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. You're on your way to full instruction. Members, all bills that have been rolled to the heel will be taken up in next week's calendar. I need a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn.